right, here we go. We go. Hey, Karen.
Hey,
It's good to
Kathy.
see you. Karen and I are here today to catch up. We met at our writers' conference in Chicago and instantly bonded, bought her books right away. And I couldn't resist this opportunity to catch up with you, find out more about your books. And then what we have in common is this deep interest in helping people through transition. And I do it through supporting people who are in transition. You are marvelously putting it on the page, and we're going to talk about that. But I want to share a little bit with you about Karen Martin. Karen's an acclaimed indie author, and she lives in regional Victoria, Australia. And sometime we'll have to hear about that. Now, I've got to hear about this one of these days. She once ran away with a circus. She created plays for prisons, and her whole goal was transformative theater experiences. And this intrigues me. She found funding to write in situ, and I believe that's where you wrote Dancing the Labyrinth in Crete. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. I lived in Crete for a year and wrote it. Yeah.
It's just marvelous. Marvelous. I know. She's contributed to a number of books, numerous awards, and her books are published in English and Greek. And what I love is, here's how she describes what she writes about. Her novels are united by a distinctive feminine narrative that probes societal boundaries. And really, that's where we are right now, and so I'm hoping people read her books, because then you can start to see what she's talking about. Her series is called Women Unveiled. So tell me about Women Unveiled. Why did you call it Women Unveiled?
When I went to Crete, I knew I was going to write a book, and I had a kernel of an idea. And it was originally from the thought that as a mother of a son, in Australia, we have rising domestic violence rates. And I sort of felt, well, as a mother, I'm bringing up the next generation. So I wanted to explore that. How do you bring your son up in the best way possible within a patriarchal society? So that was sort of the kernel. And I got to Crete, and I discovered that in the Bronze Age, the most advanced civilizations was the Minoans. I had no idea who they were. And then I discovered they are a matriarchal society. Now, I've studied history. Why do I not know of the Minoans? How did that escape? I'm searching out women's history. So for me, it was about unveiling those stories, planting the seeds, and bringing our history to the light. And in one way, it's just unveiling. Like, we've had shrouds put over. Our power's been burnt at the stake. We've been hidden away. Our voice has been usurped by the conqueror. So unveiling the women's stories, it's sort of like, it's the theme of the books that I write. Let's bring women's stories to the fore.
That's so needed right now. And fortunately, there are a number of women that are doing that as well, right? So there's this drive, there's this hunger, I think, for all of us to really know who we are. I mean, we know who we are, but like, who are we as a gender? Where are we going? What's happening to us? What can we do about it? So there's so many things to think about here as far as Women Unveiled. And so yeah, tell me a little bit more. What do you think is a message from your books for what we're going through now? Now, Australia, you're in Australia, I'm in the US. Probably most people that would be watching this are aware of the freedoms that are being taken away from women here in the US, especially concerning our bodies. And
Yes.
so you know, that is of great concern to most of us. And your dancing the labyrinth comes from a place where women had so much freedom and so much control over their bodies and their choices. But yet the book starts to show that transition over to the patriarchy. So yeah, so it's just it's fascinating, and it's you do such a great job of what am I trying to say? Like really getting us into the visceral feel of what those women were going through, right? Yeah. So if you were to have advice for women today, knowing I don't know what we're all going, Australia's patriarchal, US is like, what do we need to be focusing on? Not all of us are going to be out there and, you know, be the Gloria Steinems of our age or, you know, what would you say women would want to focus on, or what message do you have for us?
My work, originally I was a theatre maker, and everything I wrote and then put on stage, because I'm a visual person, was all about, I don't understand this. So I had to research and find out, and then I'd put it on stage and I'd work with actors, and then I could sit back and I could understand it. So I looked at women and oppression in jails. I looked at the torture, the Abu Ghraib images that came out. You know, I looked at things that were a real struggle for me to understand. And in that process, I could sort of understand my place in the world. And in a way, all my work, writing and theatre included, is always a reflection or a growing of me. So when I did the play on torture, my first thing was like, oh, no, I don't want to go through torture to understand. But it's more that subtle level that what I ended up doing to understand that was it was very Jungian. Carl Jung was that I searched out my shadow, and I'll tell you what, that's torture. That is torture. With the oppression, I was blacklisted from a university for the play on oppression. Like, I live my art. So when I look at the Women Unveiled and that sort of shift, that transition from shift to patriarchy, I don't come from a background of domestic violence, but what I've been learning, and I've got my third book now, which is really deep dived into the backstory of dancing, which is me becoming braver, is to explore the sense of absolute self. So for me, the answer to your question is self-respect. Stand in your self-respect, or find it, first of all. I thought I had it. I thought I was confident. I thought I'm out there fine. I was in a 22-year, marriage where it was all fabulous. But in the end, I gave up my marriage just recently for self-respect. And the leaps and bounds I'm growing is enormous. And for me, that is the answer, because you're right. I can't go to Iran and I can't tell the government what you're doing is wrong. I can't go to your courts and say about the Roe and the Wade, that is like, who am I? I can only be who I am. And in that, I have to be in my skin. And to be in my skin, my mantra has to be, am I self-respecting myself? And it may not be the answer for everybody, but that is the answer I've only just learned. I'm 61 and I'm just learning that now. Like, but that's it. And I love transitions, because everything is, one thing might be right one day, and then all of a sudden there's a new consciousness. Or, in the book, Vrados is the male, where he represents that change from patriarchy. But for him, it's confusing because his whole brain is changing from the matriarchal collective and sort of the magical mind. There's a great book by Eric Newman, The History and Origins of Consciousness. And I researched that to explore the consciousness and the growing of the brain. And he struggles with that. But that is his destiny, that he will bring patriarchy to the Minoans and the ultimate darkness that befalls us, which will change. It will change. But in that change, we have to rediscover our backbone, and we have to just be respectful with self-compassion. Self-compassion is a big one too, because I think that got sideswiped out the way. And we will carry a lot. And one thing of that too, I just want to mention that because I'm not sure if it'll come up later in conversations. It's not like I'm not anti-male in the least, but they have failed. I believe, rightly or wrongly, that their task when patriarchy came in from the north into Crete, they were tasked with managing violence, the anger of violence, and they were corrupted, and they haven't managed it at all. And that was their job, their one job, and they just haven't managed it. So
they couldn't do it.
No, and so there's a pity there for them. But I'm not going to get wrapped up and martyr myself for what, generally speaking, the male gender of our society have mucked up. I have to just be responsible for myself and accountable for myself. And that starts with self-respect.
It does. I love that. And that's just, it's foundational, right? If everybody could learn that, and the self-compassion. And I think we lose the self-compassion because we're caught up in making somebody else look good, or, devoting ourselves to somebody else's dream or whatever. And all of a sudden,
Yeah. Well, you taught to be nice. Be nice to this person. And we can be nice and still respectful, but be nice to ourselves too. And that's not selfish. There's a big difference between selfish and self-respect. Have a look at your bloke. There's a little bit more selfish there than self-respect, maybe. I don't know. But for us, there's an imbalance, and we need to find the balance within ourselves.
Definitely find the balance. When I was thinking about our talk today and mulling over Dancing the Labyrinth, I couldn't help but think of the modern day Barbie movie. So I don't know have you seen it?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
It was all this beautiful, it's not exactly a matriarchal world, right? But a feminine world where the women were in control, but the men were just the opposite. Men were pushed down, and then they got a little chance of freedom and they mucked it up, right? They went wild and had beach wars and all of these things. So in the end, it's not, I agree with you, it's not about hating men, it's not about like women rule. Although I have to say, last night, the Halloween groups that came by, the girls were like girl power. They came around in bigger groups together I've ever seen them. And they were like, we're here for some candy, happy hour. They were just it seems like a little more out there, right? A little more showing up, so when I see them like that, I think, okay, there's hope. Maybe they're getting it. Maybe at least some of them are getting it. And perhaps there's these stories like Barbie that could help them. I'm just real curious to see how, the books, like your book is profound, right? In terms of how it presents a narrative in change, etc. And Barbie, of course, is a lot more lighthearted, but what else is there out in literature? Because that's what changes. Movies and literature change. And I've got this quote highlighted. I should have, where is it? It's the one about your story is my story.
Oh, yeah. Your story is my story is our story.
Yeah, that basically bottom line. Yeah, it's like, if I know your story, that's also my story. And so how do we come together with this shared compassion in a way, right? To help each other.
Yeah.
And, you know, authors are brave, you know, especially to tackle issues like you're diving into, unveiling women whose powers were usurped or covered over.
Yeah. But
Mhm.
sometimes we don't know we're that brave. I like what Elizabeth Gilbert wrote in Big Magic, where she said that ideas have agency. So the ideas will float around and they'll sort of come down to you. And if you're not interested in whatever, they'll say, oh, okay, we'll go to the next person. But if you do, and they think, oh, this one, they almost flood you. So I wrote Dancing the Labyrinth in 2016, and it got published in, it was supposed to be 2020, but in Athens, but that was COVID. So I think it's a 21 publishing date. In that book, I planted a seed that one of the women from the new community, Ashtar, is going to be the new oracle for Delphi. And I planted that knowingly that if I wanted to do a sequel, that's my hook, that's my vehicle for that. And but what came through initially was Cressida's story. There was still more that I had to tell, and I didn't know this. But Ashtar was amazing because I found out later, doing the third book is called Delphi. It'd be released early next year. And Delphi was set up as a sanctuary for Gaia by a Cretan priestess. Now, I didn't know that. So
Wow. Yeah.
sometimes it's not about being courageous, it's being the conduit and trusting yourself. Like if I went into logical going, oh, you know, I better not write that because it might not have happened, whatever. Whereas I sort of thought, no, you know, it's literary, it's fiction, you know. But a lot of the stuff, and then trying to find out, well, why did Athena have her temple at Delphi before Apollo? And no one, the Greeks don't have an answer. They have certain answers. Oh, she's a protector of the sibling and that sort of thing. So there's this open license, and it's just been death and motherhood and, all this sort of like female support of having truth out there. And it was just, I don't know if I'm brave. I just think I listen carefully. When the muses whisper, I'm just down there scribing. And I enjoy doing that. I like to plant seeds, and if people can pick it up, especially I had a girlfriend talk to me about Dancing the Labyrinth, and she said, Karen, you could just put this out as a book for healing. And I use certain healing techniques that I've learned in the process of it, because it is about domestic violence. And then with the second book, with Delphi, it's like this backstory of the domestic violence, and the healing is not the healing of the past, but it's a generational healing of the future. You know, perpetrator is victim first. And so how do you break those bonds? How do you address your childhood wounds and trauma? And that comes down to that whole process I was telling you about before that I went through, was self-respect. But how do you learn that? You know, if you don't have support, if someone hasn't got your back, how do you do that? And in my process of writing and separating from my husband, I've let friends go because they didn't have my back. And that's courage. That's more braver than writing words on a page.
Those everyday connections we came to rely on, and purposely choosing to let those go. Yeah. You know, your whole journey to self-respect sounds like a TED Talk to me. Yeah.
I see your podcast. I can talk to you as my agent.
There you go. Right. I know. Yeah. Start a podcast. You know, you were talking about generational healing, and, you know, I have to just bring up that this is Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, Samhain. You know, it's the time where we honor our ancestors, and where, if we choose to, we can do some of that generational healing, you know, through introspection and ritual and in all different sorts of ways. I went to a Samhain celebration Monday night. It was very deep, as far
Wow.
as really letting go of things,
And
right? So
Selwyn is what?
Samhain it's a Celtic
Oh,
celebration of the dead, honoring ancestors. It's spelled Samhain.
uh-huh.
It's pronounced Samhain.
Are,
So
are,
the friends that I have here in McKinney are totally into it. So
are they the ones with those fabulous stone women opening up their vaginas? Is that them?
it
That's
could be.
Celtic.
I don't know.
I went to an exhibition in our capital, and it was I can't remember, it was Sphere of something or other, but it was all these amazing statues of goddesses around the world, and the Celtic one was there, and they were just out there. They were fantastic.
Probably, yeah. Some of the original women goddess cultures,
Yeah,
perhaps, right?
yeah.
Yeah. I love that you're curious. And one of the things I was curious about dancing the labyrinth in Cressida is she would go into these almost like a trance, right? I don't know what you'd call it, but when she was in the cave, she was transported, to these women in the Minoan culture. What would you like? Is that like being a psychic, being a medium, being just in a trance? What was that?
Yeah, it's
How she, how she connected with them. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I put two, there are two explanations, right? Because later on too, when they talked about the panic attacks and where that puts your brain into an alpha mode of seeing and perceiving things differently. So there was a
Okay.
logical explanation of that. Because I'm also, you know, people who read my books will be kinesthetic or visual or audio, whatever. So I'm very aware of trying to be inclusive as I write and having that
Okay.
component. Like in Australia, we have a term going, would that pass the pub test? Like, is that feasible? Is it viable? So by putting that it could be part of that alpha brain or that brain switch that happens, that you do go into trance with panic attacks, gave it a logical explanation. When I wrote it, it was in just the authenticity of they're there. We just don't see
Mm-hmm.
into other dimensions. So
Mm-hmm.
I was very mindful of trying to keep her around. So like chapters might begin with her stirring, or she cut her finger during the healing process, or to ensure that she was still in the text, because like that first part is very much the ancient stories. And yeah, that was me as a writer learning to craft it for a start, because I actually don't like those sort of dual time that go chapter 1 contemporary, chapter 2 history, chapter 1 contemporary. Yeah, like I don't. To me, in theatre, it's a blackout, and I always think of blackouts are lazy unless they're really carefully considered. So I don't like the chapter 1, chapter 2 stuff, but in writing, it's learning how to weave that. And
Mm-hmm.
it's to be however whatever you bring to the story, to what's
Okay.
acceptable for you, of what really happens. Because really, once it's in your hands, it's not my book any longer, it's yours, and it's how you
Mm-hmm.
translate it and how you interpret it. And
Mm-hmm.
if it passes the pub test, then I've succeeded, whichever way you want to see it.
Sure. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I was just curious because she would go into these spaces and maybe, like you said, collapse timelines or the alpha state, any number of explanations could
Yeah.
go there. So yeah, that's great. Let me see. Just check. Go. We've got more time. Anything else? Tell us a little bit about, Delphi, I always thought it was Delphi. So Delphi is, we're talking about the oracle,
Yes.
the place in Greece,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's just
So-
me and my Texan accent, that would call it that.
The original spelling of Delphi was Delphoi, and the OI in Greek is E.
Got it.
Yeah. Hope I'm right there. We'll check on
I'm
that
sure
one.
you are.
Fact check.
Yeah.
Fact check.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've always said Delphi. It's always been Delphi.
Okay.
So again,
Yeah.
once it's in your hands, you can call it whatever you like.
Well, that's right. But it's good to know. It's really better to know that
Excuse my cat.
your cat. I know cats love to show up on Zoom, don't they?
They do. They do. I'm going to have to just move her out the way.
She's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, Delphi's been really good fun. And I went, I'd already been to Delphi because Delphi is part of Dancing in the Labyrinth. And so what I hadn't done is that I hadn't walked from Kira up to Delphi. Now, Kira's on the coast, the Corinth coast. And that's where the boats would come and the pilgrims would walk up to Delphi. So I'd walked down, but I hadn't walked up. So I wanted to do that. And just be in the area, just to soak it up again. I ended up not going to Athena's again because it was so hot and I was so tired, and I had just come over. I'd been pretty sick. So I didn't do all the things I wanted to do, but we ended up staying at a beautiful place called Galaxidi, where we looked across the bay, and I'd go swimming in the morning, and then I could see Delphi up on the hill, on the mountain, and then I'd get inspired and be like, oh, and then come and write and sit under the tree, and that was my office, and that's what I like about in situ. Which reminds me that when Delphi got reviewed by a Greek newspaper here in Melbourne, they said that Crete is a character, the sense of Crete, the country, the land. And I remember a Cretan host that we stayed at in Ayomeli, and he had said, the land is really strong, and he's so right. It's that sense that I have that when you go to land, it's you really got to just succumb to it. So as Crete was a different character in the book, it was because Crete was there and every rock had its story. You just had to give it time. And I like that. I like that sense of the inanimate rocks and trees and everything. It's like in East Timor. There's a religion there, and I can't remember what it's called, but it's like everything has spirit. And we lose that in our Western culture. Well, we've lost it here in Australia.
Well, we certainly lost it over here. Yeah.
Yeah. That was one gift we didn't learn or respect from our Indigenous people.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's certain groups and philosophies and approaches that are trying to bring it back, but certainly not mainstream.
It's not white, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It's just on the fringes, and people do their thing.
Yeah. East Timor is huge, and they've survived colonization with the Portuguese, and then the invasion and occupation of Indonesia, and now they're just sort of finding themselves again. But that sort of religious focus has stayed with them. And I guess whilst I don't know the names of it, or I don't understand it as a religion per se, it doesn't mean I don't feel it. And so in Crete, the land is there, and it has a voice. It has a voice. So I was very happy that when the review mentioned that had come across. So that was
the Crete is a character. Yeah, you go to these places, and you can feel the vibe, you can feel the sense of what the place is all about, and it does come through the rocks and the flowers and the people and the land and all of that. I so want to go to well, Greece would be fabulous. Paris. I want to go to Paris for a writing retreat. So I was like, okay, maybe when I get this revision finished, maybe I can gather up all the input from people and then take it all in a bundle and then go over and then do my next.
Perfect. And
draft.
if you do, you need to go down to Chartres, because Chartres has got the labyrinth there.
Oh, yes. I have not been there. Yes, I do want to go. And it's just, yeah, I mean, you can get there in a train ride in less than a day, I think, or drive either way. Either way. Yeah.
It's
that is definitely something I want to do, is walk that labyrinth.
Well, it's interesting because I went with a tour guide, Dancing Spirits. I think they're out of Canada, and we were doing the and this was the inspiration for the second novel, The Bringer of Happiness. We were following in the footsteps of Mary Magdalene, and yeah, and we went up to Chartres because the labyrinth was there, and the woman Nina, who's running the tour, managed to negotiate with the priest that we would get early access to walk the labyrinth, because normally they've got chairs over them. The Catholic Church doesn't want you to walk it, because again, it's that whole thing of it's an inner journey. It's an inner journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Labyrinths are, yes.
It's not the God outside. It's the God inside.
Yeah, inside.
Yeah, which goes us back to self-respect. Yeah.
Yes, self-compassion, knowing who you are. I think a lot of us, there's so much outside influence, just constant outside noise. It really is easy to lose track of who we are and our identity and what we really stand for, which is part of what I'm attempting to write in the book that I'm working on. Is this woman's on a journey to re-find herself after some catastrophic traumatic things happen in her life. And, how does she put her life back together, and like your question, or your comments, what are we aware of? What are we not aware of? How do we find ourselves? And do we have somebody that has our back?
Yeah.
It just all boils down to that, right?
Yeah.
Oh man. Well,
Paris sounds fantastic.
I'm sorry, Paris. Yes. There's a writer I follow who is there right now, and I commented and said, I want to go to Paris next time. She's like, let me know when you come. I'll tell you where this Airbnb is, and it's a great place. And blah, blah, blah. So
brilliant.
Great to.
While you're there, you'll need to read The Bringer of Happiness, because that's all the south of France with Mary Magdalene's daughter. So that's a whole different story about women unveiled.
Sarah, yes, it is. I am this far into it.
Okay. What section? What section are you up? Are you in Egypt, or are you still on the walk?
Family that Jerusalem, it says at the top.
Oh, okay. Oh, right at the
still
beginning.
In Jerusalem.
Okay. Yep.
Still at the beginning.
Still in the beginning.
So, very, very fascinating. Well,
very interested to hear your thoughts on that one. It's had some really interesting reviews. So there's a woman who her name is Ayana, and I don't know her at all, but she really got dancing. Like, her review was just nailed it. And and then she reviewed Bringer, and again she just gets it. And just, they're the gifts that, when you get people who read your books, and some people won't like them, and that's fine, but you've got people who just get it, and they get you, and so it's fantastic. So I can hardly wait till she reads Delphi, really. But get back to me. Tell me how you go with the Bringer, because it's
Bringer. I will.
Yeah,
I love France is my place. I went last year to through southern France, and there is a writing retreat in Lyon. I think it's Lyon. Next summer, and I keep hearing little drops of. I met a lady at the celebration, the ritual, the other night, who is getting ready to move to Lyon. So, it's like
perfect.
Yeah. So anyway, well, let's wrap up with a few tips for women that, maybe going through some chaos in their life and they need some grounding.
Oh,
What is one thing that you would tell people what's the first thing someone would do about gaining their self-respect? Because like you said, we think we have these, we think we've got it. And then all of a sudden life happens and we're like, okay, well, didn't see that coming, or we have to face our shadows, or,
yeah,
any number of different reasons why we're,
yeah. Look, there I could write a book on this one. There's a couple of things.
that's why I'm asking.
There's a couple of things. I reckon the first flag for me was I had thought that I'd felt from my husband, and could be partner or whatever. I thought, well, you don't respect me. And then I held up and I thought, well, hang on a second. Do I respect me? And it was like, so why should I expect him to respect me if I don't? By putting him first, meant I was telling him it was okay to put me second. So he hasn't done anything wrong. He's gone by what I had also accepted. So in terms of people going through a hard one, before I go on to that, the one other thing is that I have been astounded by so many women I know, dear women to my heart, who say, oh, don't love my partner, don't love my husband, but they're still in the relationship because it's either financially viable. And I tell you what, it's hard if you're not in that. So if you can work something out, work it out with your self-respect. For me, I followed several things. One is the reading that I did. I realized that towards the end of the relationship and sinking into clinical depression is that the brain will hang on to that journey from A to B, that synapses, which will be depression. I mean, it's chronic. So you actually need to get help, because the brain will go, oh, this is normal now. We know this pathway. We'll just do this pathway. And so if you can't get help, how do you switch that? So what I'm doing at the moment is that I'm working on strategies to help me grieve my relationship and all my hopes and dreams that went by, to stand strong in my skin. And that starts by focusing on controlling the brain in one way. And so I meditate. And I listen to, there's a great woman, and she does free meditations, guided meditations, called Tara Brach, B-R-A-C-H,
Sure.
Tara Brach.
Yeah.
And it might just be a 12-minute meditation, but I meditate. So, and it's so hard because your brain goes, oh, here's this idea and this idea. And you're like, no, don't. Yeah. And it's all fine because it's a practice. So I'm practicing so that when thoughts arise, and I also learned your thoughts lie to you. Like, really? I didn't know that. I thought what I thought was real, but your thoughts lie to you. So, and I have big emotions. So they're my disclosure. So by meditating, I can actually go, what is happening here? What is happening here now? And can I respond with kindness? That's what I'm working on in my day-to-day dealing with people. And then if I have a question or something, I'm actually allowed to stop and pause, which I never knew. I never had boundaries. So I can stop and say, self-respect. Is this self-respectful? And that's the beginning of my journey. I'll let you know how it go in a few years' time.
I think that where everything ebbs and flows, right? And we may be able to be in our best in a particular situation, and then something else might knock us off our feet, and we have to figure it out in a different way. So it's just that's what life really is about, isn't it? Your point, two things that I heard you say that is been a practice of mine for so many years is look in the mirror. If I want to blame somebody else for something, where do I look at it? How am I being that same person? right? Or how, maybe not the same person, but how am I embodying that energy? How am I
Yeah.
reflecting, or what am I allowing? What am I allowing?
Yes.
What boundaries don't I have?
Yes.
I do work with boundaries with people, right?
That
Just
is
helping them.
great. Yeah.
And the other thing is this whole notion of meditating. It's not a notion, it's a real practice.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to say how amazing and supportive and helpful it is, be able to calm down triggers and open reflections. I talked to one of my subscribers the other day, and I said, well, what would you like to hear me talk about? And she's like, active meditation. And she's a hairstylist, and she, like, the women that come in, sit in her chair, she's like, everybody is nervous. Like, everybody they're uncertain, they're insecure, they're this, they're that, right? She's like, we need to calm down our nervous system. So I thought, that's real, and meditating does that.
Yeah.
Meditating will definitely help calm the nervous system.
Yeah.
So, well, I would love to continue our conversation. I adore talking to you always. Karen Martin, Dancing the Labyrinth. You can see it right behind her. And The Bringer of Happiness. Both amazing books about the journey of women and Women Unveiled. And I can't wait to read Delphi. You'll have to let me know. Yes.
I will. Thanks, Kathy.
All right. Karen, do you have a website? Yeah, same here. Do you have a website?
Where am I? CasJoyPress.com.
There it is. All right. CasJoyPress.com. You can get all of our books there. All right, Karen. Thank you. Stay on. And I'm just going to say goodbye to everybody else.
Thank you very
stop
much,
the recording.
Kathy.
All right. Thank you. Let's see if I can find the place to stop. Sorry, everybody. There we go.